Alexander Romano stood at the window of his high-rise office, looking out at the city he'd conquered at just 32 years old. The buildings below seemed tiny from up here, much like how he viewed most problems in his life, small and easy to solve with enough money. But today, he faced something money couldn't fix: his own cold feet. "I can't do this," he muttered, turning to face his assistant who waited nervously by the door. "Call off the wedding." 3 weeks before what society magazines had dubbed the wedding of the year, Alexander broke the news to Elena Winters over dinner at the same restaurant where he had proposed. The diamond ring that had sparkled on her finger for the past year seemed to dim as tears filled her eyes. "Is there someone else?" Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. "No," Alexander replied firmly. "I just realized you're not the right fit. This relationship was a mistake." His words were rehearsed, emotionless. "The prenup negotiations made me see things clearly. Your lawyer pushed too hard. It shows what you really want from me." Elena's hand trembled as she removed the 3-carat ring. "You think I'm after your money?" After 2 years together, she placed the ring on the table between them. "You never really knew me at all." What Alexander didn't know, what Elena had planned to tell him that very night, was that she had missed her period. The home pregnancy test she'd taken that morning had shown 2 pink lines. She'd imagined his face lighting up with joy at the news. Now, those 2 pink lines seemed like a cruel joke. News of the broken engagement spread through the city's elite circles like wildfire. Gossip columns painted Elena as a gold digger who'd almost trapped one of the country's most eligible bachelors. Meanwhile, Alexander's company stock actually rose following the announcement, as if the market approved of his decision to remain unattached. In her apartment, Elena ignored the ringing phone and growing pile of mail. Wedding gifts arrived daily, each one needing to be returned. The wedding venue needed final confirmation, the dress she'd spent months perfecting hung in her closet like a ghost. A week after the breakup, a doctor confirmed what Elena already knew. "You're about 6 weeks along," the woman said gently. "Would you like to discuss your options?" That night, Elena stared at her phone, Alexander's number on the screen. Her thumb hovered over the call button. He deserved to know, didn't he? But his cruel words at dinner replayed in her mind. The way he'd looked at her with cold suspicion. The newspapers calling her a gold digger. Would he even believe the baby was his? Or would he think this was another attempt to get his money? "I can do this on my own," she whispered to herself, putting the phone down. 2 days later, Elena packed 2 suitcases and booked a one-way ticket across the country. She left no forwarding address, told no one where she was going. Her sister was the only person who knew she was leaving. Not even she knew about the pregnancy. As the plane took off, Elena placed her hand on her still flat stomach. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered, unaware that little one would soon prove to be an understatement. Back in his penthouse, Alexander tried to ignore the empty feeling in his chest. He'd made the right decision. Marriage would have complicated things. Better to end it now than face a messy divorce later. At least, that's what he told himself as he poured another drink and tried to forget the look in Elena's eyes when he'd broken her heart. Neither of them could have imagined how their paths would cross again, or the 4 little reasons that would bring them back into each other's lives. 5 years passed like a blur for Elena. The small coastal town of Pinewood became home, a place where nobody knew about her broken engagement to a billionaire or the scandal that followed. Here she was just Ms. Winters, the kindergarten teacher who somehow managed 4 children on her own. The morning routine in Elena's modest 2-bedroom house resembled organized chaos. "Lily, please finish your cereal." "Rose, have you brushed your teeth?" "Violet, stop hiding your brother's shoes." Elena called out while packing 4 identical lunchboxes. Her daughters, identical triplet girls with their mother's dark curls, raced around the kitchen table while their brother Thomas sat quietly, his blue eyes, Alexander's eyes, focused on a picture book. "Mom, Violet took my hair clip again," Rose complained, her small hands on her hips. "Did not," Violet protested. "Girls, we don't have time for this," Elena sighed, checking her watch. "The bus comes in 10 minutes. Somehow, Elena got all 4 children dressed, fed, and out the door each morning. Her neighbors often asked how she managed. They didn't know about the nights she cried from exhaustion after the children were asleep, or how she'd stretched her teacher's salary to breaking point, taking on tutoring jobs during evenings and weekends. The pregnancy had been high risk and full of surprises. At 12 weeks, the doctor had shown her not one heartbeat, but 4 spontaneous quadruplets, the specialist had explained. Extremely rare without fertility treatments. The girls were identical, one egg that split 3 ways, while Thomas was fraternal to his sisters. Elena never regretted her decision to raise the children alone, but she couldn't deny the challenges. Her small house burst at the seams. The children shared bedrooms, the girls in one, Thomas in what was meant to be a walk-in closet that Elena had converted into a tiny bedroom. She slept on a pull-out couch in the living room. "Ms. Winters, you're a miracle worker," said Mrs. Chen, the principal at Pinewood Elementary where Elena taught. "I don't know how you do it all." Elena smiled tiredly. "One day at a time." That afternoon, Elena sat grading papers while her children played at the park across from their favorite diner. Saturday lunch at Beachside Diner had become their weekly treat, the one small luxury Elena allowed in their tight budget. "Can we get milkshakes today, Mom?" Lily asked, always the first to speak up among her sisters. "Please." The other 3 chimed in, 4 pairs of eyes looking up hopefully. Elena checked her wallet. "Just this once," she said, though she said the same thing every week. Inside the diner, the children slid into their usual booth, while Elena ordered their usual meal, 4 kids' hamburgers and 5 milkshakes. The waitress, Patty, brought extra napkins without being asked. "Your babies are growing so fast," Patty said, ruffling Thomas's hair. "Who would have thought you'd have 4 at once? Still can't believe it." Elena smiled, watching her children share French fries and giggle over inside jokes. Yes, money was tight. Yes, she was exhausted most days. But moments like these, her 4 miracles laughing together, made everything worthwhile. What Elena didn't notice was the man who had just walked into the diner, a business trip bringing him to this small town by coincidence. She didn't see how he froze by the entrance, his eyes fixed on her table. She didn't know that Alexander Romano's world was about to be turned upside down as he counted 1, 2, 3, 4 children, all the same age. She didn't see how his gaze lingered especially on Thomas, the little boy with familiar blue eyes and a dimple just like his own. While Elena helped Violet wipe chocolate milkshake from her chin, the past she'd run from 5 years ago was already making plans to crash back into her life. Alexander Romano hadn't planned to eat at a small-town diner. His private jet had landed for a refueling stop on his way to an important business meeting. With an hour to kill, his driver had suggested Beachside Diner for its famous clam chowder. "Just a quick lunch," Alexander had said, checking his watch. "I have a conference call at 3. But now, standing frozen by the entrance, Alexander forgot all about clam chowder and conference calls. Across the diner sat Elena, his Elena, surrounded by 4 small children who looked about 5 years old. "Would you like a table, sir?" the hostess asked. Alexander barely heard her. His eyes were fixed on the little boy among 3 identical girls. The boy laughed at something, and Alexander's heart stopped. That smile, those blue eyes, the same dimple on the left cheek that Alexander saw every morning in the mirror. "Sir?" the hostess tried again. "Actually, I've changed my mind," Alexander mumbled, backing toward the door. Outside, he leaned against his car, trying to catch his breath. 5 years since Elena disappeared without a word. 5 years since their broken engagement. And those children looked exactly 5 years old. Alexander slid into the back seat of his car. "Drive around the block but stay within sight of the diner," he instructed his driver. "I need to make a call." 20 minutes later, Elena and the 4 children exited the diner. Alexander watched through tinted windows as she helped them cross the street to a small park. The girls chased each other around the swings while the boy climbed carefully up a slide. Elena sat on a bench, watching them with tired but happy eyes. "Jerry," Alexander said to his driver, "change of plans. We're staying in town tonight." That evening in his hotel suite, Alexander paced the floor, his phone pressed to his ear. "I need everything you can find on Elena Winters," he told his head of security. "Current address, employment, and most importantly, her children. Birth certificates, medical records, everything." "Sir, some of that might require." "I don't care what it requires," Alexander snapped. "I need answers by morning." Sleep eluded Alexander that night. His mind raced with questions and what-ifs. Had Elena been pregnant when he ended things? Had she hidden his children from him for 5 years? Or was this all a misunderstanding? Maybe they weren't his. Maybe they weren't even 5 years old. Kids were hard to age, weren't they? But he couldn't shake the image of that little boy's face, like looking at his own childhood photos. By morning, information began flowing in from his security team. Elena Winters, now employed as a kindergarten teacher at Pinewood Elementary. Residence: a small rental home on Cedar Street. And most damning of all, birth certificates for 4 children: Rose, Lily, Violet, and Thomas Winters. Father: unknown. Date of birth: exactly 8 months after their breakup. Alexander's hands shook as he studied the documents. She was pregnant, he whispered to the empty hotel room. She was pregnant and never told me. Anger rose in his chest, hot and suffocating. For 5 years, he'd lived in ignorance while his children, grew up calling another man dad. No, the birth certificate said father unknown. Was there no man in their lives? The thought brought a confusing mix of relief and more anger. Alexander spent the day having his driver circle Elena's neighborhood, past her school, back to the park where he'd seen them. Each glimpse of his children, strengthened his resolve. By evening, Alexander had made his decision. He called his lawyer. I need you to file for a paternity test and prepare custody papers. I found my children and I'm bringing them home. As darkness fell over the small coastal town, Elena tucked her 4 children into bed, unaware that the bubble of safety she'd created was about to burst. Alexander Romano was not a man who waited once his mind was made up. Within 24 hours, his team had compiled a thick folder on Elena's life in Pinewood. He sat in his hotel suite, spreading the documents across a table as his private investigator, Ray, walked him through the findings. She's lived here for nearly 5 years, Ray explained, pointing to rental records. Moved when she was about 4 months pregnant. Works full-time at the elementary school, plus tutoring and weekend shifts at the library. Barely making ends meet from what we can tell. Alexander flipped through bank statements showing a balance that rarely exceeded 3 figures. Credit card debt. Medical bills paid in small monthly installments. His stomach tightened. The mother of his children was struggling while he had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. Any boyfriends? Husbands? Alexander asked. Ray shook his head. No romantic relationships that we could find. Her sister visits twice a year. A few friends in town help with childcare. Otherwise, she's doing it all alone. Alexander studied photos taken from a distance, Elena walking the children to school, pushing a cart through the grocery store, counting coupons at the checkout. In each picture, she looked thinner than he remembered, with dark circles under her eyes. But she was smiling in every shot that included the children. And you're sure they're mine? Alexander asked, though in his heart he already knew. Ray handed him close-up photos of little Thomas. The boy is your mirror image at that age. And the timing matches perfectly. Alexander felt a mix of emotions he couldn't sort through. Anger at being kept in the dark, shame at how he'd ended things with Elena, and something unexpected, pride. Those beautiful, healthy children carried his blood. He had a son, 3 daughters. The thought was overwhelming. What do you want to do next? Ray asked. Alexander's jaw tightened. I want DNA tests to make everything official. Then I want my lawyers to file for custody. Full custody? Ray looked surprised. That would mean taking 4 5-year-olds away from the only parent they've ever known. Alexander hadn't thought of it that way. In his mind, Elena had stolen his children, and he was simply reclaiming them. But hearing Ray put it so bluntly made him pause. I need to think, he said finally. But first, I need to know why she kept them from me. The next morning, Alexander waited in his car outside Elena's small house. He watched as she hurried the children through their morning routine, his heart aching at the sight of them up close. Thomas had his height already, tall for his age. One of the girls, he couldn't tell which, seemed to be the leader, organizing the others as they climbed into Elena's old station wagon. Alexander followed at a distance as Elena dropped the children at school, then drove to a coffee shop where he knew she graded papers before her first class. When she settled at a corner table, he took a deep breath and walked in. Elena didn't notice him at first, focused on the stack of spelling tests before her. It wasn't until his shadow fell across her table that she looked up. The color drained from her face. "Hello, Elena," Alexander said quietly. Her hands began to shake so badly she knocked over her coffee cup. Brown liquid spread across the children's papers. "Alexander," she whispered, looking around as if searching for escape. "What are you doing here?" He sat down across from her, his eyes never leaving her face. "I think you know why I'm here," he said. "I saw them yesterday, all 4 of them." Elena closed her eyes briefly, as if absorbing a physical blow. When she opened them again, they held not just fear, but fierce determination. "They're happy," she said, her voice barely audible. "Please don't ruin that." Alexander leaned forward. "They're mine, aren't they?" Elena didn't answer, but she didn't have to. The truth was written across her face as clearly as if she'd shouted it. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, not caring that people were beginning to stare. "You made it very clear what you thought of me," Elena replied, her voice gaining strength. "And what you didn't want." The coffee shop fell silent around them. Elena grabbed napkins to soak up the spilled coffee, her hands still trembling. Alexander reached out to help, but she pulled away as if his touch might burn her. "We need to talk somewhere private," Alexander said, looking around at the curious onlookers. "I have a class in 30 minutes, Elena replied, gathering her wet papers. "Call in sick." Elena almost laughed. "I can't just call in sick. I don't have that luxury. Who would teach my students? Who would pick up the kids after school?" Alexander wasn't used to hearing no. "This is important, Elena. Those are my children too." "Now they're your children," Elena whispered fiercely. 5 years ago, you couldn't get away from me fast enough." A heavy-set woman approached their table. "Everything okay, Elena? This fella bothering you?" Elena forced a smile. "It's fine, Doris. Just catching up with an old friend." Alexander stood, towering over both women. "I'll be in town for a while. We're not done talking about this." Elena watched him leave, then sank back into her chair. "Doris, I need a huge favor," she said. 2 hours later, Elena sat in her living room while Alexander paced before her. She'd called the school secretary who agreed to cover her class. Doris would pick up the kids and keep them until dinner. Now, Elena faced the moment she feared for 5 years. "When did you find out you were pregnant?" Alexander demanded. "The day after you broke up with me. And you didn't think to tell me." Elena's laugh was hollow. "Tell you? You called me a gold digger in that restaurant. You said I was only after your money. That didn't give you the right to hide my children." "Lower your voice," Elena warned. "This is a quiet neighborhood. I've built a life here." Alexander ran his hands through his hair. "A life where my children live in a house the size of my guest bathroom, where their mother works 3 jobs to put food on the table." Elena stood up, anger replacing fear. "Don't you dare judge our life. We're happy. The kids are healthy, loved, and well-adjusted. They don't even know their father exists. And whose fault is that? You made it very clear what kind of man you were when you humiliated me and walked away." They glared at each other, 5 years of unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Alexander spoke, his voice quieter. "I've already filed for paternity tests and custody rights." Elena felt the floor drop beneath her. "What?" "My lawyers served the papers this morning. They should be delivered this afternoon." As if on cue, a knock sounded at the door. Elena opened it with numb fingers. A courier handed her an envelope, nodded politely, and left. She didn't need to open it to know what it contained. "You're stewing me." Her voice shook. "For children you didn't know existed 3 days ago." Alexander at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "It's a legal formality. I have rights as their father." "Rights?" Elena spat the word. "Rights are earned. Where were you during morning sickness so bad I couldn't work for 2 months? Where were you during the high-risk pregnancy when doctors warned I might lose them all? Where were you during the 36-hour labor?" She ripped open the envelope, skimming the legal document inside. Joint custody, visitation rights, financial review. Her eyes widened in horror. "You want to investigate if I've used child support I never received?" "My lawyers are being thorough," Alexander said. "If we determine you've struggled financially, there might be grounds for neglect. The slap echoed through the small living room. Elena's palm stung as Alexander touched his reddening cheek in shock. "Get out of my house," she whispered. "The only neglect here is yours. 5 years of it." "This isn't over, Elena." "You're right, it's just beginning." She straightened her back, fear giving way to determination. "I may not have your money or your team of lawyers, but I've spent 5 years protecting my children. Don't think for a second I'll stop now." As Alexander left, Elena leaned against the closed door and slid to the floor. She had until school pickup to find a lawyer who could stand against one of the richest men in the country. Finding a lawyer in Pinewood wasn't hard. Finding one who could take on Alexander Romano's legal team was impossible. Elena sat in a small office as George Harper, the town's most experienced attorney, reviewed her papers with a deepening frown. "This is quite a situation, Ms. Winters," George said, removing his reading glasses. "Mr. Romano has filed for emergency DNA testing, temporary visitation rights, and financial discovery. His team isn't messing around." "Can they do that?" "Just demand DNA tests without my consent." "The court can order it, yes, and given the timing of your pregnancy." George trailed off. "He is their father," Elena admitted quietly. "I never denied that." "Then the tests will confirm it. After that, he has parental rights." Elena's throat tightened. "He'll take them away from me." "Not necessarily." George leaned forward. "But I need to be honest. I'm out of my depth here. Mr. Romano has hired Blackwell and Associates, one of the top family law firms in the country. We need someone with more experience." Elena laughed bitterly. "Someone I can't afford." "Actually," George replied, "I made some calls. An old law school friend practices family law in the city. She's willing to take your case pro bono." "Why would she do that?" "Let's just say she has personal experience with powerful men who think money gives them ownership rights to their children." Meanwhile, Alexander sat in a conference room at Pinewood's only hotel as his lead attorney, Richard Blackwell, outlined their strategy. "The DNA tests are just a formality," Richard explained. "Once paternity is established, we'll argue that Ms. Winters deliberately concealed the children, denying you your parental rights. That's parental alienation." Alexander nodded, staring at the family court documents spread before him. "And custody? Given your resources versus her financial situation, we have strong grounds for primary custody. We can argue the children would have better opportunities, education, healthcare." "Take them away from their mother?" Alexander interrupted, frowning. Richard adjusted his tie. "That's what you asked for, Mr. Romano. Full custody." "Had he?" Alexander couldn't remember. Everything since seeing those 4 children in the diner had been a blur of shock and anger. "What about her, Elena?" "She'd get visitation rights, of course, maybe summers and holidays." Alexander pictured Elena's face when he'd mentioned the lawsuit. The fear in her eyes. The fierce protection. Would she survive being separated from her children after raising them alone for 5 years? "Let's slow down," Alexander said suddenly. "I'm not sure full custody is what I want." Richard looked confused. "Mr. Romano, we've already filed the paperwork." "Then change it." Alexander stood up. "I need some air." Walking along Pinewood's main street, Alexander found himself outside the elementary school. Recess was happening in the fence playground. He spotted them immediately, his 3 daughters playing jump rope, his son building something in the sandbox. His children. The words still felt strange. A teacher approached the fence. "Can I help you?" "Sorry," Alexander stepped back. "I was just passing by." Before the teacher could respond, a small voice called out, "Mummy." One of his daughters, Lily maybe, had spotted Elena walking across the playground. All 4 children ran to her, surrounding her with hugs. Alexander watched as Elena knelt to their level, listening intently to whatever excited story the children were sharing. Her face transformed with love, a look he'd seen directed at him once before he'd thrown it away. What was he doing? Did he really want to rip those children from the only parent they'd ever known? Take them to his empty mansion where nannies would raise them while he worked? Or was this all about punishing Elena for keeping them from him? That evening, as both legal teams prepared for battle, Alexander made a decision. He pulled out his phone and sent a text message. Asterisk, we need to talk again. Not as opponents. For the children's sake, asterisk. Across town, Elena read the message as her 4 children ate dinner. She wiped spaghetti sauce from Thomas's chin, wondering if Alexander saw himself in that face. After tucking the children in, she replied, asterisk tomorrow. 10 a.m. The park bench where you first saw us, asterisk. Whatever happened next would change all their lives forever. Morning fog rolled in from the ocean as Elena sat on the park bench, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup for warmth. She'd barely slept, rehearsing arguments and pleas to convince Alexander not to tear her family apart. When his tall figure emerged through the mist, her heart raced with fear and something else she didn't want to name. Alexander sat beside her, leaving space between them. For a moment, neither spoke. "Thank you for meeting me," he finally said. Elena nodded, eyes fixed on the empty playground where her children would normally be playing. "The children are with my friend. I didn't think they should be here for this." That was probably wise. Alexander cleared his throat. "I've been doing a lot of thinking." "So have I." He turned toward her. "I saw you with them yesterday, at the school." Elena tensed. "You were watching us?" "Not in a creepy way," he clarified quickly. "I was walking by and saw recess happening. They looked happy. You're a good mother." The unexpected compliment caught Elena off guard. She'd been prepared for threats, not praise. "I need to know why, Elena," Alexander said softly. "Why didn't you tell me about the pregnancy?" Elena took a deep breath. "The night you ended our engagement, you said something I'll never forget. You said you dodged a bullet by not marrying me." Alexander winced. "I was angry. My business partner had convinced me you were after my money." "It doesn't matter now," Elena interrupted. "What matters is I found out I was pregnant the very next day. I sat by the phone for hours, trying to decide if I should call you." "Why didn't you?" "Because I pictured your reaction." Elena's voice trembled. "I imagined you thinking I got pregnant on purpose to trap you. I imagined lawyers and prenatal paternity tests and custody battles before they were even born." "You didn't give me a chance," Alexander argued. "True," Elena admitted. "But can you honestly tell me I was wrong about how you would have reacted?" Alexander opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. After a moment, he shook his head. "No. Back then, I probably would have thought exactly that." Seagulls cried overhead as they sat in silence, the weight of truth between them. "What happened with the pregnancy?" Alexander asked. "Finding out about quadruplets must have been terrifying," Elena finished with a small laugh. "The doctor thought it was twins at first. At 16 weeks, they found the other 2. The medical bills nearly bankrupted me before they were even born. If I had known." "But you didn't," Elena said simply. "And we've managed." Alexander ran a hand through his hair. "I missed everything. First words, first steps." "You did," Elena agreed, neither accusing nor comforting. Alexander turned to face her fully. "I don't want to miss anything else." Elena felt tears threatening. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying I've instructed my lawyers to withdraw the custody suit." Elena's breath caught. "What?" "I don't want to rip them away from you. That would hurt them, and hurting them is the last thing I want." He paused. "But I do want to be in their lives." "As what?" Elena asked cautiously. "As their father. I'd like to start with visits, get to know them, let them get to know me. Maybe eventually shared custody that doesn't disrupt their lives." Elena studied his face for any sign of trickery. "And if I agree? Then I'll buy a house here in Pinewood. I can run my business from anywhere." Alexander hesitated. "And I'd like to help financially. Not because I'm trying to buy them, but because they deserve everything I can give them." "They don't know about you," Elena warned. "I've always told them their daddy couldn't be with us, but that he would have loved them." "Would have." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Will love them," Elena corrected softly. "If you're serious about this." "I am." Alexander reached out his hand, stopping short of touching hers. "I can't change the past 5 years, but I can be here for the next 50. For them. And," he met her eyes, "perhaps someday you might forgive me too." Elena didn't take his hand, but she didn't pull away either. "The children have a school play next Friday." Thomas is playing a tree. The girls are butterflies. She swallowed hard. It might be a good place to start. Alexander smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in 5 years. I wouldn't miss it for the world.